You're listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889. Thank you for listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM. I'm the owner, Johnny Chandler, and the host of Community Forum. And here with me today is Ed Mayer. Ed Mayer is the program director for Holtec International. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Yourself, Johnny?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for joining us. I know that Holtec International is working with Eddy and Lee County and on a pretty big project for the community. And so I just kind of wanted to jump right into that. And so let's just talk from the very beginning. What is the project?
Well, the project is a consolidated interim storage facility for spent nuclear fuel. So I'd like to just give a really quick primer on what spent nuclear fuel is, just so we know what we're talking about. So spent nuclear fuel, an assembly is about 12 feet long, about a foot square. It's made of stainless steel, zircaloy, which is a metal, and ceramic. Okay, so it's not liquid. There's no green goo, nothing like that. So it's metal and ceramic. These assemblies operate inside a reactor, about 150 of them for about 5 years. And when they're spent, they're taken out of the reactor, they're put in a pool temporarily, and then they're put in a very large stainless steel cylinder, 1/2 inch or 5/8 inch thick stainless steel, 15 feet tall, 6 feet in diameter. And it could have 30 to 90 spent fuel assemblies. So that's what we're talking about storing. It's a large stainless steel canister with 30 to 90 spent fuel assemblies in it. There's no liquid, and the assemblies are made of stainless steel, zircaloy, and ceramic. So what Holtec proposes to do is to bring these stainless steel cylinders, which are distributed all over the United States, over 60 different locations at nuclear power plants, and bring those and store them in New Mexico. And that's really what the project is. It's an interim storage facility for spent nuclear fuel. And it would be interim until a repository is open, like Yucca Mountain or another deep repository, and then they would be moved there.
Okay, so a lot of people, I think The Simpsons has kind of made everybody think about what they believe that, spent nuclear fuel is going to look like, right? So that's not the case at all. It's not this green tube that floats in the back of Homer Simpson's shirt when he's leaving work, right?
Absolutely not. And in fact, it's very controlled. Each one of these spent fuel assemblies is controlled by serial number. So we know exactly what the starting uranium level was, the final, how long it's been in the reactor. It is a very controlled process, and we know exactly what's in each stainless steel cylinder.
Okay, so that in a nutshell is what the project is, and you're going to store it at a facility. And where's the facility proposed to be located?
It's going to be on the border. It's going to be in Lee County, on the border between Lee and Eddy County, about halfway between Carlsbad and Hobbs. So what we'll do is all these cylinders would be shipped to the facility by rail. And I'd like to discuss the rail casks after I talk about the facility.
Okay.
But I'm in by rail. And the cylinders will be stored. The best way to think about it is a steel silo. And the silo would be just below ground level. And that steel silo is surrounded by concrete. It has concrete under it, and it even has concrete over it. And then the stainless steel cylinder is lowered into the silo, and then a 15-ton lid is put on top. So it's incredibly robust. You could fly a 737 aircraft into it, will do nothing. This is impervious to any man-made and natural disasters. And phase one of the project is 500, we'll say, silos to hold 500 canisters. So again, what's interesting is that this facility, the technology was designed to operate on the San Andreas Fault,
okay,
Southern California. And in fact, we have this technology there at San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station. It could take a 1.3 G shake, the San Andreas Fault. And we're using that same technology. We propose to use it in southeast New Mexico. And I think, southeast New Mexico is nowhere near as seismically active as Southern California. But that just shows you how robust the facility is. And how the facility works is, spent fuel still gives off a little bit of heat. So the heat is removed from natural circulation of air. It doesn't use electric. It doesn't use water. The air touches the side of the canister, and as it heats up, it's the chimney effect. The air rises, and then cooler air, not cold, but just cooler air will come in the sides and goes down to the bottom, and you will have a natural circulation of cooling. So it doesn't need electric, and it doesn't need water. And even if water does get in the vents and touches the outside of the stainless steel cylinders, it really helps it cool. It doesn't affect it in any way, but it's designed to cool with air.
Okay. So before we get into the security and the safety measures that you guys have instituted for the transportation on the rail, why don't we talk just for a second about, you mentioned kind of where these cylinders are sitting now, right? So, and where are they in 60 different sites across the country is what you're saying. So before we get into putting them on a rail car, where are they now specifically? Like not location wise, but more along the lines of, are they on surface lots? Are they buried anywhere else? Like how does that working currently?
No, exactly. Holtec and our competitors, Orano and NAC, have mostly an above ground technology. So these stainless steel cylinders are in very, very robust concrete and steel overpacks. And those overpacks can be, a 737 can hit those also. They could withstand an earthquake. They could withstand a car being thrown into it from a tornado or a telephone pole. These are incredibly robust overpacks, but most are above grade, and they're stored at all the different nuclear power plants, whether it be in the Midwest, the Northeast, Southern California, along the East Coast are many of them. So that's where they are now. And the reason they're there is because the federal government by law was supposed to open a deep repository by 1999, Yucca Mountain. And that repository never opened. And because of that, it's a breach of law. It's a breach of contract. So all the utilities sued the federal government. And the federal government had to pay them to build dry storage, because as I kind of alluded to, when you take the spent fuel assembly out of the reactor, you put it in a pool because it's very hot. But then once all the spontaneous fissions, the heat production drops, you put it in dry storage. Well, that was the time it was supposed to move to Yucca Mountain. Well, Yucca Mountain never opened. $12 billion to build it, and then it was never opened. So the utilities had to put the fuel somewhere. So they put dry storage at every site. So right now it is being stored safely in safe technologies at over 60 sites all around the United States.
So, another question would be, what would be the benefit of, shipping it to Southeast New Mexico and putting it in the facility that you guys are wanting to build versus leaving it where it's at?
Sure. The big benefit is, and it's kind of easy to visualize, you have over 60 different sites with spent nuclear fuel. So each one of those sites has security, it has operations, it has maintenance, it has all the overhead workload required to make sure it's safe and secure. Well, if you coalesce those, if you bring those to Southeast New Mexico and you store it in one facility, you can save billions of dollars, billions, tens of billions of dollars, because rather than having over 60 sites, you'll have one site.
Okay, perfect. That makes a lot of sense. So we're starting from, we have them in 60 different sites. We're going to send them on rail cars here to Southeast New Mexico, which is a very supportive community. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about how you're going to transport them on the rail car and why that's something that should be called safe.
Right. First and foremost, I think it's not obvious to most people that we as a nation transport spent nuclear fuel now. There's been over 1,300 shipments of commercial spent nuclear fuel shipped and over 850 shipments of Navy nuclear fuel from submarines and aircraft carriers. And it's been done on rail cars, and it's been done safely without a release. It's regulated by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and also the Department of Transportation. So as a nation, we have a tradition of safety with shipping spent nuclear fuel. It's just, this just doesn't, most people don't recognize that this happens. So when you start discussing shipping spent nuclear fuel, there's concern because they're just not cognizant of that happening. So that one of the reasons it's so safe is, again, it's a tried and true process, but there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. Is number one, the security. There is embedded security with the train. Now, this is a train that's only going to pull, it's called a unit consist. It's only going to pull casks of spent nuclear fuel. So we think for ours, it would be about 10 casks. It's going to have 2 locomotives, and it has what looks like a caboose, which is really a security car.
Right.
And there will be armed and trained guards. And the whole transportation is coordinated with the states, counties, and towns that it goes through. And there's actually an operations center that stood up 24/7 to monitor the progress of the train. Now, the casks themselves are unbelievably robust, and I'll give you some examples. The cylinder and the cask together is about 300 tons. Now, it's on a 12-axle rail car, so if you do the math, the axle load is less than a locomotive. Okay, so it's not going to be overweight for the tracks. But the cask itself is 15 inches thick. So it's 6 inches of steel, 3 inches of lead, and 6 inches of a polymer. And the stainless steel cylinder is put inside the cask, and the cask is bolt shut, and it has impact limiters. So how robust is this cask? Well, if you took this 300-ton cask and you took it up to 120 miles an hour and you impact it on an immovable object, an unyielding object, a huge piece of granite, a huge piece of concrete, a huge piece of steel, it's unyielding, it's not going to move. The cask going 120 miles an hour on the side, in the front, or on an edge, it would not breach and it would not release. And that's 120 miles an hour on an unyielding target, we'll call it.
And you've done some testing of this as well, right? The organization your company has?
Yes, we've tested one of our casks for one of our clients, and it's actually above and beyond that load. The client wanted to know that if a fighter jet impacted the side of a cask, that the cask would not breach in any place. So we went to Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and we took a 1,000-pound missile made of Kevlar, 600 miles an hour, and hit the cask. If you go to our website, you could see that test. And it didn't breach. Interesting part is that is another technology cask. It's a High Star 180, and that only has 2.5 inches of steel. Whereas the rail car that we're going to use, that cask, has 5.5 inches of steel. So I say 6 inches because I rounded to 6 inches. It's a little over 5.5 inches of steel. So it's over double the steel. So that missile test was above and beyond the NRC requirements. And there's one other example I'd like to use. If you took this cask and you burned it for 30 minutes at over 1,400 degrees, it would not release. So it's like taking a rail car of petroleum, 30,000 gallons, and putting the cask in 30,000 gallons of petroleum and then lighting it on fire and letting it burn for 30 minutes. it would not release. So that's how robust these transportation casks are. And again, I go back to this transportation occurs on a routine basis around the country, but most people don't have cognizance. So when you hear, hey, we're transporting spent nuclear fuel, we all assume it's something new, but it's not. There's a process. It's tried and true. We've done it over 2,000 times safely.
All right. So, I mean, long story short on that, despite all the technical it is safe. It's been proven to be safe, and it'll be safe when it's shipped here as well.
That's a fact. Exactly, John. It is.
Perfect. So we talked about where it's located. We talked about the project in general. Now, Southeast New Mexico, I would say compared to almost any other community in the country, is not afraid of, I think, helping. What I consider, I tell people down here, is our areas of national security importance because we do things for the nation that other communities won't, if you will, right? So WIP is the WIP pilot project. That plant, WIP Isolation pilot plant, is one of those to where, our community is happy to have that because we know that it's important to the country. It's important to national security, but it's also just an economic benefit as well. So let's talk a little bit about the community benefits for a facility like this in Southeast New Mexico, which is big on oil and gas, big on potash mines, also big on nuclear waste. But so, when it comes to energy of all sorts, Southeast New Mexico is all in, if you will. So let's talk about how the community can benefit from this.
Right. I mean, we'll just take it one step at a time. You look at the construction phase one, which would be, it would be to be able to store 500 of these cylinders. That's $130 million capital investment. If it was built out to 10,000, storage for 10,000, it's a $3.1 billion capital investment. A lot of concrete, a lot of rebar, a lot of steel, a lot of manpower to build it, but $3.1 billion capital investment. The facility itself will have 100 operators, and they would unload the rail cars, upend the cylinders, and then lower end them into the storage silos. There'll be 100 workers, and that includes security, and about 100 long-term construction jobs, because we believe this will be built in phases, blocks of 500 at a time. So this construction could go on for a decade. So 100 long-term construction jobs and 100 operations jobs, about $75,000, we think, but it's what the market will bear. It may be more than that. So you're looking at about $15 million a year just from payroll that's going to go to the local communities. Holtec has an agreement with the Eddie Lee Energy Alliance. We're going to share 30% of the gross revenues with Eddie Lee, which means we're sharing it with the local communities, the counties, and I know that Eddie is putting together some agreements with the state. So 30% of gross revenues, just for phase one, we think that'll be between $15 and $25 million a year. And for every phase, you just multiply it. If there's 5 phases, you multiply by 5. Right. And probably the biggest, I think the biggest economic benefit really out of all of that is there's going to be a manufacturing facility somewhere in New Mexico. Right now, Holtec, we have about 1,500 employees, and we're based in Oroville, Ohio, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Camden, New Jersey, and actually Pune, India. That's where our founder's from, India. So we have 4 centers, and we make this technology, the high storm UMAX, in Camden and Pittsburgh. But these silos are massive. They're 20 feet tall, 8 feet in diameter. The lids are huge. We would like to build those locally. So we're going to build a manufacturing facility somewhere along a rail line in New Mexico. And Dr. Singh's dedicated to do that, to build the silos and the lids. And one interesting thing is that this is going to be a Holtec manufacturing facility. So in time, you could build really any of our technologies here. So these would be long-term jobs. And just based on the silos and the lids, we believe there'll be 150 cutters, benders, and welders, 50 a shift, 3 shifts a day. And then on top of that, probably 50 admin, laborers, and logistics. So 200 jobs. Again, $75,000, $80,000 a year. So there's a lot of payroll right there going into the local economy and a long-term production facility.
Anybody that's spent any time in New Mexico knows that $75,000 to $80,000 a year is a good salary, especially in this state. It goes a long ways in New Mexico, that's for sure.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is. So they're the economic benefits. So it's the capital investment, it's the jobs at the facility, the revenue sharing agreement that Holtec has, and then that manufacturing facility. A lot of people ask me, well, where's it going to be? Well, we don't know yet because we're focused on licensing. Right now, that's really my task, to get the facility licensed. Once it's licensed, then we'll be able to look down the road. A lot of people ask about, well, what are the routes that the spent nuclear fuel will come in? We're not looking at that closely because until we have a license, we can't have contracts, and we can't, we can move into the next phase of planning once we have our license.
Let's talk about the process of getting the license, the process of licensing, and where we're at now. I know, there's a lot that I think many people don't understand about this, and the hoops that you have to jump through with state and federal government to get something like this done, for sure. But I know that we could start by saying we've had some positive developments on the EIS, right? The economic impact or environmental impact statement.
Yes,
Let's start there.
It's the final environmental impact statement. If I could start by just saying that we've been working on this since 2015. We have about 30 engineers and analysts that are working on it. And when the detailed design and the licensing is complete, Holtec would have invested about $80 million in this endeavor. And we're paying for that internally. So from a licensing perspective, you say you're jumping through hoops. There's a detailed review. And really there's 2 aspects of it. There's the final environmental or the environmental impact statement that you spoke of, and also a safety evaluation review. So the NRC has to prove to the public, because that's who they work for. They work directly for the White House, but for the good of the public. They have to prove to the public that the facility is safe. And then they have to prove to the public that it will not affect the public or the environment. And they're really the 2 deliverables for a license. To prove that it's safe, it's the safety evaluation report. It's a multi-dimensional review of the design, the operations, the effect of natural and man-made disasters on the facility, the physical security program, the emergency plan, all that rolled up. Again, a multi-dimensional review. And you'll either get a positive or a negative safety evaluation report. And we expect that in January 2023. The other deliverable, and what you said we just got in July, is the environmental impact statement. And the EIS followed the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act process. And again, that's another multidimensional review that's led by the NRC. But one thing I'll note that the Bureau of Land Management was a coordinating agency because there's a lot of BLM land around the facility. And also New Mexico Environmental Department was part of the review. And that was at the behest of the governor. And the NRC, that wasn't our review, that was the NRC's, it's the NRC's review. They said, by all means. So in that case, the NRC looks at how does it affect land management? How does it affect water resources? How does it affect the economy, social justice, cultural, historical, all these dimensions of the project. And then it's documented in first a draft EIS. And the draft EIS was released 2 years ago. And there were public meetings. The general public could comment on the draft EIS. And the reason the NRC does that is because they know that people who live in that location have a different perspective and may have a perspective that they don't. So they want public input on the EIS. And they took all the input. There's a whole appendix in the final EIS, and they address all those concerns. So there were public meetings. The public could comment on it. And then the NRC rolled those comments into the final EIS that was just released in July. And if I could, I have a quote here. In the final EIS, it said, based on its environmental review, the NRC staff recommendation is issuance of a license for the proposed facility subject to determination of the staff's safety review. And the safety review is the SER that I just spoke of. So if we get a positive SER, we already have the final environmental impact statement, and then we would hope we get a license after that. So this is something that's been going on for 7 years. It's a detailed process, a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions with the NRC, pulling for more information. And the 30 engineers and analysts that we have working on this at Holtec have done their best to get it to where they are. But again, the NRC is an independent assessment from a safety perspective and also from an environmental perspective, independent of what we provide them. They use what we provide them as input.
Right. So I think that the idea that, this takes so long should be calming for anybody that might be somewhat against the project, which I haven't heard anybody down here that's against it living here. But the idea is that, this is a multi-review, multi-agency process, right, to ensure the safety of the facility. This stuff has to go somewhere. As you were stating, our country is not anywhere closer to having a permanent repository for its waste. This stuff has to go somewhere. You have a community that supports it. You have a technology that supports it and can benefit from it as well, and to make sure that it's stored safely. So I think that should make anybody that's on the fence feel better, because this is not something that's been done overnight.
No, it's not. And in fact, both the NEPA process and the process used for the safety evaluation review that the NRC also did, that's all in law. So these are regulations on the book that they have to follow. So this isn't something that's done different every time. This is the process that they follow to say a facility is safe and a facility does not affect the environment.
So if you're comfortable, because we are getting pretty close on time already, if you're comfortable, when do you think that we can actually have shovels in the ground at this facility? The construction is always estimated out in seasons or even years for that matter, right? So, we're not holding anybody to anything here, but when do we think?
Right. We believe that we'll have a positive safety evaluation review in January. Then there's a 30-day public comment period. So we believe we could have a license in February. And if we have a license in February, then we have to we're doing our detailed design now. So we'll have our detailed design done. So we could have shovels in the ground sometime next year. It would take 3 years to construct the facility. So really 2026. And during that time, we'll get contracts with utilities. We'll define rail routes. Those rail routes will be approved by the NRC. If the tracks have to be upgraded, the tracks will be inspected and upgraded by the FRA. Again, there's a process to do that. So again, it will take 3 years to construct. We think we can start mid next year. So probably mid 2026. So I don't think that's too optimistic. I think that's a realistic timeline.
All right. Well, so we're almost out of time. So is there anything else you want to say in closing?
Yeah, I'd like to say just another perspective on why we're doing this. 20% of our nation's electrical power comes from nuclear power, 20% from renewables, and 60% from fossil fuels. If we as a country want to slowly move away from fossil fuels, this interim storage facility is going to help a resurgence in nuclear power. Nuclear power is a base load 24/7, 365, regardless of wind speed or time of day. And it really is the path to reducing the country's carbon footprint. So when you look at, a higher level on why we're building this, It's to reduce the pressure on the utilities for local storage of spent fuel so they can start moving their fuel off, which we would hope put nuclear power in a different light, which would then allow it to resurge and then would help reduce our carbon footprint. So that's another way of looking at it.
Now, this is just another benefit to this facility in general and to the way that the country is going. So, I mean, that's perfect. And I'm really, Ed Mayer, Program Director of Holtec International. Holtec.com is the website if you want to go check out the safety test that they had. I've seen it. It's really cool. And it's, anything that slams something into a canister at a certain miles per hour is just really cool in general,
I agree.
And it came, obviously, the project was very successful. So thank you, sir. I'd love to have you again on at some point as we get closer to construction. And thank you for being on.
I appreciate you, Johnny. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. You're listening to Community Forum on KCCC 930 AM, sponsored by Eddy County, honoring God, country, and family, thriving with industry since 1889.